Dang. Welcome back to part 3 of the turbo tank build. In this episode, we're going to be running through a bunch of bits and pieces to do with the rear end, which is going to consist of getting this big bad set of tyres up into that really big wheel arch. So that is going to consist of 4 link brackets, 4 link bars, track locator, anti-roll bar, shock mounts, and a couple other bits and pieces that we're throwing in it. Just changing some stuff up in the back. So we've got a couple of cool things that we're going to be throwing in there that we're not going to mention, but you'll have to watch and find out what we do. So let's jump straight back into it. What we're going to do first is we're actually going to lower this down on the ground. We're going to be putting the rear axle in the location that we want it and squaring it up to the car, making sure we have no clearance issues. And then we're going to address getting the 4 link brackets up in here. So with these 4 link brackets, these chassis rails that we already measured weren't too bad. There's a couple of little bits and pieces we're going to change. We're going to be getting rid of this bar here and adding some other bars in here as well. But that's not going to dictate anything to do with the brackets. So we held the brackets up in here earlier, and we saw that the length of the brackets aren't going to fit on here, and there will be no need to have any of the holes for the 4 link lower than the bottom of this rail here. So what we're going to do is we're going to be chopping out and scalloping the top of the plates first, so we know we can sit them up in place. And we're going to be bringing the car down to ride height. We're going to be measuring from the floor to the bracketry with the tyres pumped up to how we're going to race. And the front end, we're just going to make sure it's all nice and even and level and everything, because we'll scale the car and everything once it's all together, all the oils, all the weights, driver weight, fuel, and everything else is in it prior to doing the rest. But we want to make sure that bracketry is bang on, because we want to be able to keep the car nice and square without having different length arms or anything like that. So on this plate here, you'll see there's a couple of lines that we've put there, which are going to get chopped off to follow in the rail there, because we're not going to be using that top hole. And that way, with the slider, the great thing about these is we'll be able to lower it if we do need anything lower. So we're going to get the car down now, get it on the stumps, make sure it's nice and level. We do have our adjustable feet in the back here that'll dictate changing the heights and getting it where we need to be if we need to turn the rear end. And then we're going to be squaring it and plotting it out on the ground and putting it back up, and then making sure everything lines up. So watch us do that now. What we're going to do now is we've just chucked it on the hoist. We've leveled it out, so when it comes down on the locks, the car's exactly where we want it. So now we're going to go around and we're going to put a bunch of reference lines on the ground. So the ones we're going to do with this plumb bob right here is we're going to be doing sill points that are the same both sides. Now this bottom sill's been jacked up, off, replaced, all that stuff. So we're actually going to pick up just off the inside where the floor pan comes across to the car. Now it's the same both sides. We already had a look and we're very happy with it. So we're going to do that. We'll reference mark that down to the ground, and the same in the back coming down. So we know the car is exactly where it needs to be, and that's going to give our reference lines off when the car is level on the bitumen or on the track, or whatever word you want to use for that. So we're going to go around, we're going to put these onto the ground, we're going to grab some tape, and we're going to put tape on the ground and put X's where this plumb bob is exactly going to drop on. And then from there, we're going to use that to reference where we're going to put the 4 link brackets. All of the sills are all marked out, and they actually ended up being within 2 mils, so I'm perfectly fine with that. We got the adjustments in the back that we needed to, so the car's all nice and square. Then you would have seen, come here, there's one mark here and there's 2 marks at the back there. So the marks at the back there are the 4 link brackets to the center of the rails, to the center here. Now, whoever done the rails back in the day, you did a good job because they're bang on to the center of the car. So we picked that reference up off the axle center line at the front, and we marked the center on the bottom of the sump, held the plumb bob there, and then we've brought that mark down and referenced it back to the rear rails. So those are going to be fine that way. So distance from front to back. And now we're going to reference the center line height wise as well. And then that is going to dictate where the brackets go on the rails. So we'll make up a set of bars that go between the 4 link brackets, and we'll square them up on the table, and then we'll be able to hold it up and then do our measurements for the bracketry going on the rails. Thought I might intervene this little bit of the episode because it's our last day and Mr. Lockie is all signed off. So he is qualified now, so that's a big achievement on his behalf. And we've surprised him together with the guys from Plazmaman with a bunch of goodies. I think he's unwrapping his last bit now. Excited?
Very excited.
What's that?
Fast parts.
So those who don't know, this is Lockie's 33 GDST, and he always wanted one, so he ended up getting one. And down in Victoria, you can't drive a turbo car on your P plates, so your probationary period. But the time's come, he can do it, and there was no one else to turn to other than our friends at Plazmaman, and they have dropped off a whole bunch of goodies. So the Skyline is getting intake manifold, the throttle body, all the clamps for the cooler pipes, their billet rails, and as you saw, the Pro Series cooler. So that'll be going in his car down here, Mr. 033. So massive congratulations to Lockie for being qualified. And yeah, now you can get back to putting that 4 link in the big girl up here. But once again, massive shout out to the guys at Plazmaman for coming to the party and making this happen before Christmas. He's a very excited kid now. Yeah. So happy days. All right, and if you're interested in watching us build the GTST, let us know. Comment below. Thanks. Back to it. So we're now going to grab our plumb bob and mark up here where they meet on the ground, and then we're going to start transferring our 4 link brackets. Now our 4 link brackets are identical both sides. Our rails have the same height, and we're going to recheck all that now. And then we're going to make a little jig up just to keep it nice and square, just easier to put it back into place. We'll pop it up in here, we'll tack it back in place, and then we'll get the diff in position and start figuring out our depth from our wheelbase for starters, and making sure that's in regulations as well, which should be. It's not extended front end, it should be plenty fine, but it is a long car. And then we can get some arm measurements. So we'll start getting the arms, and we're going to take you through how we do all that, how we put the weld-ons in, doing the plug weld, rose weld, whatever you want to call them, whichever part of the world you're from. And after that, we're going to start working out ride height and shocks. So you would have seen earlier, we used the plumb bob at the bottom of these start of the rails here. So on this upsweep, they lean back just a little bit. So what we're going to be doing is checking them right up in the corner just below the weld. And the reason for that is to make sure that they're actually going to be the same distance this way, because we know our car's nice and plumb and it's level off the ground exactly how we need it, and we've adjusted the feet how it needs to be. So now I'm going to hold the string for the plumb bob up here and then down, and then they're going to be in line because we've got our center lines here. But we're just going to measure back from the bottom of the rail to the top of the rail from here to here. So, and then Lockie's going to measure from there back, and then from here back, and then hopefully we should have the same. So at a quick look, it's 25, 35, 40, something like that, distance lent back. So what we're going to do is now check that onto the ground, make sure our references are right, so when we put those brackets on, they're not like that. All right, so Lockie's just running down the back to grab the TIG because we're going to be tacking this brace in here. So this is just a quick little brace that we've whipped up, and all it is the center of the rails. Take the thickness of the bracketry, which shortens it down, which gives us the center here. So you only grab the thickness off one side, because if you grab it off two, it's going to be all the way in. So we don't want to do that. But it's just a quick way to square it up. Our table's nice and flat because this is a big bit of steel. And we're just using equipment that you should be able to get from anywhere, any tool shop or anything like that. Very basic stuff. So what we've got here, we've got a square at the back edge here. We've got obviously everything bolted up tight as well. We've got a square along the back edge of the bracketry here. And then our square doesn't go quite the width. So what we do is we run a steel rule along the inside of that square along the back side here. Now that will hit right on top of either side of the brackets, and then we obviously measure with engineering square. Once again, you can get it from any good tool shop along the side there, and that's nice and plumb. So let me show you how we're looking here. So that square there is sitting like that. So if it was a little bit out, if the bracket was out, you'd have a gap down the bottom or a gap at the top where it's touching, but push that nice and square up. Perfect. Also, make sure that you're working on a table or a jig or all that is nice, flat and square. There's nothing worse than getting it all done and you're on something that's not flat or square. So we've got that measurement there going across. Now we triple check everything else. So from the inside, now there's multiple layers just quickly. So we're measuring just these outside brackets. The inside ones won't be able to move, won't be able to twist or anything like that, because they're sandwiched together with a big bolt. So if we measure across the bottom here, we have 545. Then we measure to the inside of the bracket there, we've got 545. Measure there. So this sweeping that I'm doing isn't guessing the measurement. What it actually is once you've got one point here, the shortest point when I sweep the tape measure is where you'll see will be the closest thing. So, and when I do that, I get 545. So that's all good so far. One last one on the back here. And 544 and a half. So, no, that's not a problem whatsoever. Now, what we're gonna do is, we're gonna tack these in. Now, they're not staying like that, they're just getting tacked in place. And then we'll be able to grab this nice and square up to the car. And we've just measured the rails top to bottom are good, and we've measured that they're triangulated to the front nose of the car, all well and good. So we'll be able to grab these, put them up in place, and as long as the bottom sides of these brackets are in the right spot and they measure out good, these 4-link brackets will be ready to go in the car. It's not as easy as this on a lot of different applications, and chassis jigs and everything are all relevant when it comes into a big full build. We have no main bar to go off, and the 2 bars that are in there are not quite in the right spot. So what we're actually doing is triangulating the car to make sure it's nice and square and straight, and then these will always be our reference point where these are mounted. So we'll tack it up now, we'll grab it, we'll chuck it in the car, and then we'll start making some heat, tack some things in, and make some bars up. Let's do it. All right, so we've got that tacked in place, and it's nice and heavy tack, so it's not going to go anywhere. So if we stand this up, you'll see that these bars will sit flush with the back. They're nice and straight. Make sure you use a bit thicker wall too, and triple check that you're not getting a bit of twisted piece of steel, whether it's angle, box section, anything, because it can be a little bit out of place. Now, like I said, ultimately not exactly what you want to do, but it's how we're doing it, and we've done it multiple times before and never had an issue, so we're jumping into it for all these people that are going to be like, oh, it's not how you do that. Thanks. So we're going to weld these in place now. We're going to take them over to the car, do some measurements, square it all up, and bang it in the car. So we got this all held up in place. It ended up being right where we need it to be. Now we've got our lines up here. Now this line is obviously the center of the brackets. So then we'll be able to, when we put it in place, we'll be able to measure the center of that to the center of that. and that is the bottom side of our slider link brackets. So they're the ones that are going to be welded onto the chassis. So that is the bottom where we want them. Now the bottom of these rails aren't the same, but that height is exactly the same plumb with the car. So that is where we need the brackets to be, not at the bottom of these. These have obviously had caps welded on the end of them and a tube and all that stuff. So we're going off our lines, not off the bars, but there's enough purchase area on the rails to put them right where they need to be. So lucky us, we get to put it in, tack it up, and then we can start doing the welding process and banging them all in. So we'll do that now. We'll prop you up over there and you can watch us tack it in. It's all tucked in. We still have the brace in, so I like to leave the brace in just so I can continue to weld as much as I can without obviously getting in the way of everything. But I like to leave it like that because it is holding it in place. It's only going to help it, because obviously when you're welding to box section and all that stuff, it will want to warp and everything. So the more you can help it, the better. The more rigid you can make it, the better anyways. And through the heating and cooling period as well. So make sure when you weld something, you don't just cut it off and hope for the best. Let it cool down, let it find its home. That's where it's going to stay. Now, so the brackets are in. What I'm going to do now is, we still have our reference marks on the ground. What we're going to do is bang a 1/2 inch bolt through there. We're going to run the string line up and over the bolt like this. And we're going to pull that string line up a little bit. With that string line through this bolt, what we're going to do is we're going to put it through this bolt here on the bottom control arm, on the bottom bolt, and then on the bottom bolt of the top control arm. And what we're going to do is reference mark them on the ground and then measure them back to triple check that these arms are going to be in the exact same distance off the back of the car, because you can be forever chasing something with the arms if these aren't right. So it is very, very critical to get these as close as you can, and we're going to quickly double check where they are now, because everything up to this point's been good, but continuing to quickly check this. Lockie's laughing at me. Continuing to triple check these things is only going to help make sure everything's perfect. So we're going to smack it out now. All right, so we have our measurements on the ground here, where we have put the bolt through over here, put our string line up and over, and grab that and trace it out to the ground. So I'm happy with that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the welding process. So we're going to mark the gaps that I'm going to weld. So we're probably going to do like a 25 gap. We're going to take some of that sealer out, because when I tried to tack that black sealer does not like getting welded. So we got to wipe some of that out and get the wire wheel in there and get all that out. And then start the welding process. We don't just go one big bang, we do it in increments. And if you want to do that and you want to know more about that, we can do a welding tutorial maybe later on, but not right now. We're going to jump into it, start welding it, make these permanent, and then we can start figuring out putting the diff in, getting these arms sorted. Isn't that right, Lockie? Looks enthusiastic about this. Best. That is the brackets all stitched up. Now we're going to let it cool down in place, cut this frame out. When we yeet the frame, we can be able to get into all these bits that we've welded between. So you can see all those pretty welds in there. So And then in this side, we've been limited room to get into. So we'll be able to cut the frame out, weld all the other pieces in between, but quickly, we're gonna measure between here and here, make sure it's all the same or no different than how it was on the table, because we don't wanna be getting any further than we already are before we find out something's out or something like that. Battery might have died on the GoPro. Now, we're gonna measure, make sure it's all the same, because we don't wanna go any further than we already are before we find out another issue. Now, we've already got our reference points down on the ground and everything, that we know everything's good. So during the welding process, we want to make sure, like I said, things move. Nothing has. So we're going to quickly double check, let it cool down. In the meantime, while it's cooling down, we're going to get this big bad boy. Get this ready. How's the flicker from the lights out of the gym? We're going to get this thing up in place and get our center line of axle sorted, so then we can figure out bar length and everything else. Let's do banjo or something.
3 days later.
Alright, we've got the diff all set up here, and this is just after we've put the wheels in, we've bottomed them out on the tubs, we've given the clearance that we need, because at the end of the day, that is the last thing we need happening with the tyres expanding, being slick tyres. So they're going to grow and the car's going to squat at some point. So what we do is we have our measurements, that we have our allowances to keep off the guard. So we bottom it out and then we bring it down, which then will dictate ride height, because no matter what we're going to do, we're going to make sure it's not going to be able to grab the tub. So when we did that, we got our heights that we needed for the diff tubes. We got our depths as well. So we've got our measurements from the front as well, what we need to do. So now we're going to mock the diff up, and we're going to pack it, space it, and get it where we need to be. Like I said, not ideal how we like to do things, but sometimes we got to do it how everyone else can do it. So we're going to do this, get it in place, put it where it needs to be, and then we're going to get some eye-to-eye measurements, and then we're going to be able to make our arms. And then we should also be able to figure out where our shocks are going to go. So we know that we've got the rails are straight, the rails are true, straight all the way down. Heights, we know that they're the same. And so when we're doing our measurements, we know what we can and can't measure off. So we're going to get this up. These brackets are going to be in line with the rails. So we'll be able to put our plumb bob up the top in the center of the rail, run it back down, make sure that that's true. And then the measurement from front to back, we're going to be able to make sure that that's right too. So we're going to get this in, get some arm measurements, and then we'll be able to start putting the rest in. So, I'm gonna have to bring him up a little bit, and that'll be 20 minutes later. The SpongeBob thing right here. I'm gonna start again, just start again. There's 3 parts to a falling bar. Hold on, who is it? Name and shame. Jessica! So this will be like the proper one. Falling bars. So usually only 3 components to this. We've got our weld-on tube adapter. So that is our tube adapter. So this is 4130 chromoly. And majority of the time, unless you're doing titanium pro mod stuff, that's what it's more than likely gonna be. And then we also have our heim joint, or our rod end. Rod end being what it is, heim joint being the style. So that is a heim joint. That is a steel bushed heim joint. And then you've got a nolithane heim joint, and an abundance, depending if it's off-road racing, compliant for the road, just depends on what application you're doing it. And the third and final piece to the 4-link bars are the molly tube, or the steel tube, or the tube. So 4-wheel drive guys will use box section, whatnot. A lot of the race car component stuff, we're going to use chromoly tube. So we have 2 different sizes here today because the kit that Jason has chosen is a competition engineering Magnum kit, which they've supplied all these goodies we're about to bang in. So when we're doing our 4 link bars, first thing we need to do is figure out our lengths, which is what we just did. So now we've got our lengths, we're gonna figure out what we're gonna do with our tube to cut it down to size to make it all work. There is an abundance of ways of doing this. I've been around long enough to be able to speak to a lot of people that have been doing this for years, and almost every single person has a different way of doing it. It's, for me, for an engineering background, it's very straightforward just to measure and do the tubes, but yeah, I've had people have jigs that they just slide the bolts, put the heim joints on, measure in between and do that. But there's 7,000 ways to friggin' skin a cat, but we're gonna do it how we do here, and it's just measure. So we make sure that the rod end's where it is. So we measure from the center of the bolt hole to the beveled edge where our tube is gonna be welded to. So let me quickly bang that in so you guys can see. All right. So if we look here, we have the beveled edge on the tube adapter. We've got the tube and the rod end. So we wanna get the measurement from here to the center of the bolt hole on either end. Now, keeping in mind, there is 2 different styles of weld-in rod ends. One will have the hex on it and one will be flat. The reason for that being is, the one with the hex on it, it's the one we put the spanner on to adjust it. But there is another reason as well. One is gonna be right-hand thread and the other one's gonna be left-hand thread. Because if it wasn't, we'd have to drop one out, turn the heim joint or the rod end, and then put it back in. Where this way, we can turn the hex on one end and it's gonna extend or shorten the arm. So what we have here is 2 different heights. So as you can probably see there, they're not the same height. So we've got to measure one end and the other end, do an equation, and then grab this and then cut it to size. Beautiful. That's it. They're all prepped. That is going to be our upper control arm. So what you would have seen just then is cutting them to size, beveling the edge, so it gives us a really good weld just in there. But see that little hole? That is where we're going to do a rose weld or a plug weld, whatever you want to call it. Whatever makes you happy, call it that. But so not only is that going to be welded around here, it's also going to give it an extra bit of added strength welding it this way. Now, I stagger them. It's just how I was taught how to do them, and that's just how I do. So these are going to be ready to weld up now. So what we're going to do before we final weld them is we're just going to tack them nice and stiff so they're all done and all ready to go. We're going to mock everything up, get it back up, and then do all the final welding last. But I reckon we could probably head over and cut that bracket out where the 4 link bars go. Four link bars are in. So super happy with that. It's looking pretty cool. With those 4 link bars tacked in, we're going to work centering the diff and triangulating to the front of the car to make sure it is nice and straight. And we also have our reference points being the rails. Obviously, they're already in. We've already made sure that they're straight. And then we'll be able to figure out our shock mount. So our shock mount's going to go up and then go across. And then that's obviously going to dictate where we're going to put the rear shocks. So they're going to go off the back of the 4-link brackets there. And then after we get all this sorted, we're going to be putting a track locator in this that is going to go from the front here back to the diff. So that's going to work really well to keep this thing in the center. So we're going to figure out how we're going to attack that after we get the shocks in, so we don't have to have this table here anymore. We're on to the shocks. All right, so our 4 links in, and now it's time to jump into the shocks. So these are the shocks we're going to be mocking up with. Jason is still deciding what to do in regards to what shock he's going to run. So we're going to use these ones he already has. Now, probably wondering why we have some 25 SHS here with a couple of holes in them. Now, I'm actually got a video coming that will talk a bit more about shocks and setup and stuff like that as well, which will show you a bit more about this and why we've got them at certain heights and stuff as well. But with every race car has a different application, whether it's a big tyre car, small tyre car, running a slick or running a radial, and everything that the suspension needs to do. So in this case, we have a height from, this is at full extension, height to height, and this is the height that we're going to choose. So, and this is going from eye to eye, yeah? So that's what you're looking at there, not the overall height of the shock. Now, every application's different, but in this case, Jason's got a big tyre slick car that he wants to run at a prep track and no prep and low prep. So we've got the shock at a point where it can squat the necessary amount that it needs to, and it also can extend and do what it needs to on a bit better prep track. So anyone that wants to know a bit more about that, let me know, comment below. Let me know if you want to know what suspension does and how we monitor that and what we do for different sides of things. People's interest and stuff like that, I don't know unless you guys tell me, so comment below and let me know. But for now, we have our shocks going in the car, so let's head over and smash that out. So we mocked up our shocks in here and we figured out exactly how we need the shock brackets to go on the back. Now the kit did come with some, I should say they should come with some, but this kit, couldn't find them, it is what it is. But we're gonna make them our own anyways, because I want to change them up and get a bit further off the back here just for some clearance stuff, because how we're gonna run the anti-roll and everything like this on this, we're gonna make up our own. But let's head over to the table where we've got a few different shock brackets. So heaps of different shock brackets. We use a whole bunch from your billet style ones here. Billet, different offsets. So we've got this bracket again on the lower one. So we get that from somebody, and then we've got this one. Now, one thing you'll notice is the holes, different hole spacings, but this is the hole spacing we want, and this is the bracket. Is very similar to what we're going to do, but we're just going to have a little bit more length on them. So we've gone ahead and we've cut out what we need over here on our plate, and then over here we've got them all bolted together, and we're just going to trim them up, make them all the same like we've done on this side here. So make them all the same, and then we'll go ahead and we'll drill all the rest of the holes we've got all marked out here. And we'll fold them up how we need to, so they can be exactly how we want them, and kind of a one-off part, but it is what it is. Sometimes they work the best. We do like using the billet brackets. We've got a whole bunch of different styles and stuff we use with these, from being a lower style bracket to like that, and then we also have like one that has like a mid level clamp on it as well. So we'll smash these out, get them on the car, and then we can start figuring out the top bracket in the car. So I feel like we're gonna have to probably put a tube across the top there, because I want to reinforce a couple of bits and pieces to that chassis as it is. So we'll smash these out and then we can jump onto that. So, that's our brackets all together. So, they look like one big piece, but they're not. If you see where that's opened up a bit, you'll see there's 4 there. And you got the burrs on this side for where we've drilled, but that side was already countersunk a little bit, so you'll see a big difference from side to side. But we're gonna pull these apart. We're gonna countersink, deburr everything, take the edges off so they're nice and easy to handle. Nothing worse than making a part or ordering a part or whatever, and they're sharp edged, or you hit your knuckle on them and they hurt. So what we tend to do is take off all these sharp edges and deburr them all, because we don't need any issues. And then we should be able to mark them, and then we got to figure out how much we need to bend them. Beautiful. That is our shock brackets all done. So they are all done there. All the sharp edges are taken off. See that? Beautiful. And they're all the same. So happy days. Now we get to the point where we're gonna be putting a fold in them. So there is 2 lefts and 2 rights. Reason for that being is you got our shock bracket here. They need to open up and then put the shock in between the 2 plates. So nothing worse than doing them all and folding them all the same way and then having to make more to do that. So, and because these probably being like a one-off bracket, I don't really want to have too many of them sitting upstairs. So we'll go ahead and figure out where we're going to do here. So we're probably going to follow that line there. Coming down is the first break. They're not overly long. They are longer than the ones that we had in stock, but we'll put the first break along the lines of that, so it keeps all the integrity in the bracket. And then the next one, we'll probably bring it along and just make sure we've got no interference with the bottom eye of the strut. Because if we make them too short, maybe the body of the shock might hit, or yeah, it is what it is. You got to make sure that nothing's going to get in the way. Hence, why you'll see this hole is actually a little bit taller in this bracket, because the body of the shock's got a billet aluminium cup on the bottom of it, and if I had it too low, it would have fouled out on the top of the bracket. So that is some of the things you need to take into account when you're making shock brackets, or any mount for that matter, with specific bits and pieces going in it. And always refer to looking at different parts or moving forward. So the reason why we've made these big drop brackets is because Jason has intentions to possibly go into a bigger shock, and there's nothing worse than having everything set up and then you have to change it again to do it. So we've made this so he can put a big, large shock in it if he felt like it, or if the car needs it, but cross that bridge when it comes. So now we're gonna mark these, get them over to the pan brake, fold them all up, and then we'll be able to start mocking up those shocks. Yeah, keeping in mind, we'd also make a lot of other products, guys. So things that have been going off the shelves lately are these strut tops for rear of XE, XF Ford Falcons. So they are back in stock. These ones are just about to go off the powder coat. So make sure to hit us up on the socials, on Instagram, or hit us up on the email at sales@dngfab, and we'll be able to send you out your own. So let's keep going. We've got some brackets all whipped up here, and we've got our bars in place, our suspension. So from here, we're just going to tack things in place and then redo our measurements after it's tacked. But we have our level referenced off our chassis, and we've got them on there. So you'll hear this beep at 90 degrees. If you come around here, so you'll see that is 89.9. degrees. Yeah, 89.9. Ain't hurting nobody. So from here, we'll tack them in place, these outside ones. And then what we're going to do is we're going to weld this bit of moly tube that we got in here. We're going to weld this in place up the top, and then we're going to make 2 more clevises for the inside of the shock that come in, because it won't be on this bracket, and I didn't want to bend them out. And we're probably going to utilize this for some other bits and pieces in the future. So what we're going to do is bang this bar up in there, and then make 2 more clevises that come down the other side to make that a double shear point on the shock. So we'll tack these in place, get this bar in, weld those other clevises in, and then we should be able to mock up the suspension. All in. So we've got our brackets up here. We are going to put some gussets in there, just going to let it cool down. We're going to put some little gussets in here just to keep them at the same separation, so they're never going to move around or anything like that. We've got our bar in, and we're going to do some final welding on the top side of that bar when we pull the diff out, just because I can't get in there at the moment. And from here, we've got you see this tube going through the bottom. So we've got a little idea we're going to do with bracing the diff, and we're also going to use this bottom part of the diff here, this tube going through the bottom, not only to keep the separation between the blower brackets better, we're also going to be bringing the front end of it over to the track locator. So the wishbone's going to go towards the front, and we'll show you how that goes together in just a minute. But yeah, it's getting there slowly but surely, so it's really good. We can comfortably take these fellas out now. And we should be able to have a fully suspended diff, just like so. So that is killer. We're going to jump onto this wishbone and stuff in the morning. So that's going to wrap up today, and then we're going to jump straight back in it. So I'll see you in the morning. All right, we are back on to the diff, and this time we're going to be just quickly stiffening up the last bits and pieces of the shock brackets. So Lockie's cut up all the plates, so we're going to be banging them up in place like that, as well as welding them up, drilling some holes, and that will be the upper shock mounts done. And then I've just quickly whipped this up. This is a little template we've made up for the lower mounts for this bar. So this bar goes all the way through the lower point of the diff brackets, and we're going to stiffen them up right where we're going to have our wishbone on the other side. So we're going to have these right there. So obviously we're not going to be using this one because it's got a split in it, but we will be able to template this one and then make a left and a right, because obviously they'll be different, and then get them welded on along with our lower mount here, which will pick up that point of the diff. So we'll jump straight into that now. We'll get all that done, and then we can jump onto the wishbone, the track locator for the front. So you can jump into that right now. It's starting to look sick in here, so I'm super happy about this. All right, we have the braces are in, along with the doubler plate down the bottom, and we also have our jacking stump down the bottom, which is right where the drain is on these Race Products diffs. So that's pretty cool. And we've got all the shock mounts up the top here all braced. So Lockie's smashed them out. So those gussets are all tacked in, so we can final weld them. And yeah, it's fair to say that this is it's coming along good, and it looks sick under here. So now we're going to jump on to the tail shaft loop just prior to doing the wishbone, because we don't want that bar at the front there. We don't want that warping or anything afterwards. So we'll jump onto that now. All right, so you should be able to see where we've got the tail shaft loop all mocked up in here. So that is the beginning of the tail shaft loop, and we're going to have a couple more braces going from the bottom corner up either side, along with another little loop that we've got in the bottom here that will be scalloping to fit in place. So we'll get this all done and do all this. So this bottom bar, once we put the clevis on the front for the track locator, we know it's not going to move whatsoever. And you'll see on this side where we've put our braces is actually the same points our track locator is actually going to be picking up the diff. So that way everything's braced, everything's stiff, and we won't have any issues going down the track with the diff doing this when it's all nice and braced up. So let's jump onto that tail shaft loop and then we'll jump into the track locator. You'll see we've got the top of the tube cut out just there. And that is because this bar up here is welded on a 45-degree angle. So what we're going to end up doing is actually popping it behind that and welding it across the top here. And then we're going to unpick this and fold it down, the tin work on the other side, and then we'll be able to weld on the inside there. And then on the bottom piece here, because we're going to have a lot of tail shaft with the big tyres and the big suspension, a lot of tail shaft movement, we want to keep that nice and low. So that's scalloped onto that mid bar just there. So what we do is we bang these in the bottom like so, put that like that, bring that down. Now we remeasure it back in place, and that's going to be roughly how it's going to look just for now. Then we'll measure it up, tack it up, and then we're going to have some more braces that go from here back up there. Like I said, those braces that are going to go from here and up, they are to make sure that this bar isn't going to go up and down or left and right, or just keep it nice and central, because we're going to have our clevis for our track locator right there. So then that is going to triangulate back to the diff and be all happy. But love phones. I've got to put them on silent. Mind the welding mask here, but we've got the hoop all welded up, so that's in there like that. Obviously we need to cut behind here and get behind there to weld the other side, but other than that it's all welded in there. Now we're just going to measure up where we're going to be banging our brace here. Lockie's just cutting out the other side, so we'll measure that out, we'll tack it in place, and then we'll get that all welded up. And then we should be able to jump on the bang in the clevis in the middle here for our track locator. So we'll do that. Pop you here. Put you on a little bit of time lapse right now. So that's all braced up, hoops welded, both sides. Thought I might just touch up on these quickly. You'll see we drill holes in certain areas on the tube. Now the reason for that being, for those who don't do much of this stuff, is for captive air. So in the tube obviously it's going to have air, and once you put pressure in, well, heat onto it, makes pressure, has to escape. So we drill holes to relieve all that air, and then later on we go back and we fill them up and quench them and keep it all seamless. But now we're going to be jumping onto this track locator. So you'll see a little mark here, which is the center of the 4 link brackets, and we have these cool billet clevises that we use that'll be getting put right there. So what we need to do is, you'll see that's all nice and flat on the bottom. We need to make one that contours to the shape that we're going to. So we'll grab this. See, that's as easy as it is. Anyone can be a fabricator, just ask for it. So that's this one here. You'll see that'll sit nice and plumb there. Now yeah, this is obviously going to be the front one, and then we're going to have some at the back here, that's better, that go to the diff here. So we're gonna have to shape a couple more and whatnot. But once we get that all tacked on and we make our measurements, then we head over to the bench. So over to the bench, you will see that we have all the components here for the wishbones. Here we have our wishbone. So a wishbone is a style of track locator to keep the diff central from going side to side. And yeah, like there's many different setups that don't use track locators, like a triangulated forelink or leaf spring or stuff like that. So different styles of suspension don't always need a track locator, but in this case, with a parallel forelink, we definitely need a track locator. So this will consist of a few different parts. Obviously, we spoke a little bit on the billet clevises that we use. So those clevises obviously are the mounting point for our heim joints. We've already touched base on our heim joints. That is our heim joint. So as you can't see that, that's our heim joint, and that goes in there like that. So these will go at either end, and then our track locator will have a total of 3 heim joints, 1 at the front and 2 at the back, or vice versa. Track locators can go both ways for those who don't know. And then we'll have one of these up the front here, like that. Now, this is our main shaft for the sliding component of the track locator. Now, this will in turn go that way, and it will slide in and out of the car as the suspension goes up and down. It will need to slide up and down like so. And inside of this we have some bushing. That bushing in there is pretty cool. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see in that, but that's got a bronze liner in it, and these go in the end of this tube here. Now it's got a circlip on that end, and we end up having another 2 of those bushes just here that go in this to complete the sleeve. That sleeve is going to end up being reamed out to fit the main shaft perfectly. So then that way we don't have any knocking about or any of that business, which will obviously in turn give the car an issue down the track. Now we are going to be putting this on our chassis in between the forelinks. So that'll go at the front here, and then we've got the frame. So the frame is pretty much just going to be in a triangle shape. Now we've got our rough measurements already. So it's going to be from heim to heim is going to be 700, and then width is going to be 400 across, which is going to be on the diff. So then you got the main shaft, the sliding link on the main shaft at the front here. Then you got the frame, and then you got the bracing. So we're going to have a brace down the bottom here, so that keeps that nice and strong. And then we're going to bang an X brace in it, just like that. Now, people come up with a whole bunch of different designs, and room's always limited in different applications as well. But in this, we've got plenty of room. It's a tried and true design. Many people use it, and yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do it. As long as it's structurally sound, it'll be just fine. So this obviously stops the diff from going side to side. So our heim joint is going to be sideways. So it's something that even when I started out doing things, I never thought that the heim joint orientation was too big of a deal, because at the end of the day, you're not going to put enough load on that size heim joint to break it, but at the same time, you want to use it correctly, and the correct way to load that up would be side to side that way, not that way. Now, being a spherical ball in the cup, it's not going to pop out. My VK has had it like that for an awfully long time, and that's definitely the too hard basket to change right now. But I've never had an issue with that. But at the end of the day, as things come along and you learn things, we are going to be banging it sideways, so to make sure that orientation's correct. So we load the heim joint up the right way. So then you'll have the heim joint at that end, heim joint at this end, and then you'll be able to lengthen and shorten the distance in the heim joint. That'll in turn keep the diff left and right, so we can get it nice and parallel with the car, with the wheels. And then another thing to take into account is with these track locators, it does have a bunch more benefits than some other styles, like a diagonal link. So a diagonal link if these were the bottom bars, lower control arms, if they were there, and then you have a diagonal link which goes from the front, doesn't matter what side, from the front to the back on the opposing side, the articulation of the diff is not very much. You can jack the front corner of the car up and it'll only have a slight amount of a travel before it starts to lift the back tyre up. We're on a Watts link, Panhard bar setup, different, more of a street application. We use that quite a bit down in Vic because of the ruling and whatnot, but the Wishbone gives you a great advantage for articulating that diff as well in most applications, whether it be race, street, off-road. There's so many different ways it can work. So, all right, now that we've got that sorted, we're gonna jump back on, get those mounts back on the diff and on the chassis. After we get them, we'll be able to reference exactly the shape that we need. We'll make a little jig on the table, and then we'll get to welding it up, notching everything up, and get it going. So let's do that. Now that we have the clevises tacked on the diff and on the chassis, now we can go ahead making a jig up to make our wishbone. So clevises all welded on the chassis there, and we've got two clevises, one here and one here, all welded on. So now that we've got them, we've transferred this down here with the plumb bob, and we've got all of our measurements. And then we're gonna head over here. So what we've got here, we've got some thick wall RHS. So it's nice and sturdy, it's tacked nice and square and welded on the sides where it needs to be. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer our measurements from over there onto the jig, and we're gonna mark it out, and then we're gonna be putting some 1/2-inch bolts in place of where the heim joint eyes go, and then we'll be able to start making it all happen. So watch that happen right here. Alright, so everything you just seen was just mocking up, getting things ready. So what we have done is we've tacked some 1/2-inch bolts in place of where our clevises go. Now, I know there's a few people are going to be like, you need a jig table and all that stuff. Guess what? I don't have a Wishbone jig table. So we're working with what we have. I haven't had an issue with how I've done it, so we're going to keep on doing it the way I know how to. So we are specific with the measurements and all that stuff. All of them are where they need to be, and we do have a little bit of leeway in regards to adjustment and stuff as well. But like I said, it's nice and flat, doesn't rock, there's no silly bits or pieces that are gonna pop up. But now we go to Measurement City. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna finalize this heim joint as well by locking them up and putting a roll pin in it, and then we're going to ream out our bushes, which can sometimes be a bit of a pain in the ass, but it is what it is. We'll ream out the bush for the sliding link, and then we're going to, from there, go and space that up accordingly where it needs to be on the jig. So we're going to get that sliding link sitting parallel with this. And then from that measurement there, we're going to be also doing the same with the bars that go to it. So I just wanted to quickly rough these in because it just makes life a bit easier. So that's exactly what we've done. We've cut them in the bandsaw so we know roughly where they are. We've got a mark, obviously they didn't sit perfect, but we've got a mark of where we're going to notch it out. And I like doing it that way too, because we can get more purchase on the slider link from those outside frame bars as well. So we're going to chuck it in here and have a guess at how to do this. What are you up to?
I am making stiffening bars that go to the bar under the tail shaft loop to stop it from moving back and forth.
Perfect. Do you want to grab that and we'll show them where it's going?
Yes, sure can.
All right. So you would have seen that we put the tail shaft loop in and we've put our bars here to stiffen it up from side to side movement. But Lockie is just banging these bars in, which are going to go from here to our chassis rail. Oh, can't really see under there. Let me grab a light. All right. Perfect. So they go from that main bar just there and they're going to go back to the chassis rail connecting point over there to stop that bar from what?
Moving back and forth.
Oh yeah, look at you go. So they're going to bang up there and we'll do another one on that side. So once he gets them done, we'll tack them in place. Just about to ream our sliding part of our wishbone. So you'll see, it does not fit in there. Doesn't matter what you do. So we're going to have a quick measure. All right, so we have 25 point, let's go 2.8. And then in here, maximum of 24.8. So we've got to take it out, what, 0.5, so half a mil. So we're gonna grab one of our reamers. So we've got a set of reamers here. I already know it's gonna be the biggest one we have. And let's quickly see what the reamer is currently at, 25.15. So I reckon with a little bit of wiggle room, probably need 2 passes on this just to make sure it's right. And obviously when we put it in the vise, all 3 of these like to move, so we do it a bit tighter. Always do 1 pass through it, nice and even, pull it out, then test it, because you don't want it flopping around. It's no good. So it's meant to be a really precise fit, and that's exactly what we're going to do with this. So a little bit of lube on it, and we'll plop it in. Don't worry about him. We'll plop it in, and then we're going to slowly go through it. Slowly go through it, and then we're going to push it all the way through, and then hopefully it'll be the first time, but more than likely do another one. So we'll set you up and you can watch us do this. That is our first pass done, and it's looking pretty good. See, that is mint. But it's just got a little spot in it where it just, see, that's how nice you want it. You want it nice and tight, but that won't go in anymore. So we're gonna pull it out of the vise. Double check, and then we'll probably do 1 more pass with just a slight more thickness on it, and then we'll be able to, yeah, these are the little plates that we're about to put on our side rails up here. So with these plates, we've also got holes in them. The reason why we have holes in them is they are plug welds. So not only are we going to stitch around the outside, we want to have a bit of purchase area in the middle as well, which is going to have a bit more grip holding onto the side of the chassis rail plate up here. So we'll get them in first and make sure that they're all situated in the right spot, and then we'll be able to TIG weld our bars straight off them, just like so. So that way we're not relying on the stitch around the outside as well. We are relying on that, as well as the plug welds to do their job together to hold it nice and firm and in place. Alright, so that's our patches welded in. So that is the plug welds and then the weld around it. Now we'll clean them back and they'll look a bit more like that one over there, all nice and cleaned up. And then coming back to this bar, we'll have to weld him in. Alright, so those stabilised bars are all in. Either side, looking good. Alright, that means we can finish up our track locator. Alright, so obviously that'll slide and that's how much I want. Yep. Yeah, I don't want any more than that, that's happy days. Now we've got this nice and straight and we need exactly 3mm to prop it up for it to be plumb across the bottom. We've already measured that. Now we grab the engineering square, we pop that up nice and against it, and we bring this ruler down. So we do that, and then that's nice and square up against that, and that'll give us a measurement. So you've got 33mm there, and then down the bottom here we have 33mm there, so that's nice and straight, yeah? Yep. And we take that out, like that, and we're just going to tack this fella. So once that's in place, we know that pushing that across, it's going to be bang on where it needs to be. Yep. And then we've got these pieces. So these will, let's see, slide in there. And we need to drill our holes, remember? Yep. Alright, so, but where that's sitting will be too long, won't it? Yes. But what we're going to do is, we're going to scallop the bottom of that. Yep. So if you grab the flap disc, beautiful. That feeds up, so that's mint. They made up pretty nice, there you go. What a huge bummer. Not only did the battery die when we were tacking this together, it's all tacked together, it's looking great. But you might notice, we've got a second set of bolts here. You probably already guessed it. I'm trying to contain the frustration I have. But the measurements are out. I don't know how I missed that, it is what it is. It's one of those life things, just gonna get on with it. Need to cut all this out, bring them in, notch everything again, start again. It is what it is. We're all human, I suppose. I'm just so frustrated. So I'm gonna begin the cutting process, take it all apart, move these heim joints in, that 50mm, and start again. So, I'm gonna probably not even bother filming this, I just wanna get it done. So, jumping into it now. You know it's a hot day when your GoPro ends up turning off because it's too hot. good things have happened in the meanwhile. Track locator is in and looking, mwah, if I don't say so myself. It's all coming together. Obviously we've got our point at the front there, and then we've got our two at the back. And our slide link and everything will fit in there nicely. And happy days. But while the GoPro had a little bit of a meltdown, we have just tacked some plates up there. So, and we've drilled and tapped them at the back here, where you can see the bolts have come through. And now we're gonna put that anti-roll bar tube off the bearing ends, which we'll go grab the other one now. And from there, there's a lot of things we need to factor in when we're doing the anti-roll bar, and especially at the mock-up stage, because our shocks are much bigger than this 25-25 box section that we have there. So we need to factor in that we can't have the arm too close. It's got to come inboard quite a ways, and you'll see that we have some reference marks on that tube at the top there where we're going to be popping these, but that will end up in turn being on a bar about there on top of the diff, and then we'll have our anti-roll bar. All right, that's it for today. I'm done, mocked it up. It's hot, sweating my canoodle out. So track locator's in, all the stiffener bars are done, and we have our anti-roll bar, hasn't moved since it's been here. Anti-roll bar all mocked up here. So you'll see plates, bearing ends, arms, rod ends and arms and stuff, and that's it. That's it for today. Done. I'll see you Monday. All right, so we got Jace coming down to see his rear end in the Fairlane for the first time. What do you reckon?
Bloody awesome. Starting to look good.
That's it. It's coming together pretty good. So we just ran him through what we've done. He hasn't seen the diff together or anything, so this will be his first time seeing the diff together, the four link, track locator, anti-roll bar, and we were just looking at other couple of bits and pieces we want to change. And one of those things was parachute. We're probably going to change this because going to go a little bit faster than the car was ever intended to. So one of the other things we're going to be putting in it is this transcooler. So if you want these transcoolers, see the man himself. So we're going. That's it.
We're going to look on shotgun and give us a like.
That's it. And then that'll be getting banged up in the middle there. So we just got to make sure that we got room for the wheelie bars and some other bits and pieces. Jace is just going to see what he wants to do in regards to the wheelie bars, and then we'll attack getting the mounts on the diff and everything for them, or possibly make some changes to it, because once again, I don't think these are intended for the power Jason's putting at it. Like we mentioned at the start, there is going to be another one because there's too much to put into one thing and we don't want them going any longer than they are already. So thank you for tuning in to the end, and on the next episode you will see us final weld all of the goodness up here and continue down to the front, including the rear end, track locator, anti-roll bar. We'll be receiving our wheelie bar kit, and we'll final weld the trans mount and a couple of bits and pieces along the way. So thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the little bell, because the next time it comes out, you'll be the first to know. So stay tuned and I'll see you in the next one. Well, we can't show you too much because obviously you need to see it at the end, but dang, that's fat.